Last week, writer and Criterion Collection strategist Maya Cade released a passion project that has been percolating since June of 2020, much like Donda. I'm kidding.
Not in the archive yet, notably. Yes.
Welcome to Keep It, Cricket Media's show about pop culture and politics and what happens when they smack into each other at an alarming speed. I'm your host, Ira Madison III, a television writer and Fall Out Boy fan.
I'm Virtel. I'm a TV writer and Jane Fonda historian.
And I'm Aida Osman. I'm a TV writer and alleged comedian.
Let's get into it. The Black Film Archive. The goal was to list every black film made between 1950 to 1979 that is currently streaming. All the films collected on the Black Archive have something significant to say about the black experience, speak to black audiences, and or have a black star, writer, producer, or director. This criterion for selection is as broad and inclusive as possible, allowing the site to cover the widest range of what a black film can be. I'm very glad that Maya made this list because, as we all know, SALT speaks to me as a black person.
Sure.
And probably would have been on my Black Film Archive.
Not you arguing how Angelina Jolie is a light-skinned woman.
Look at those lips, okay?
Look.
Maybe
Anyway.
the sequel will make the list. Who knows?
Yeah, the kinky hair that she has. Come on.
Yeah, it's a 4C. After she's running around after a while, it gets all curly.
The one question I would have about the project, however, is knowing what was left off because it didn't make the criteria and what was left off because it's just not streaming.
Right.
Yeah, let's ask her to do a supplementary list. The black film unarchived.
I was interested to find in the frequently asked questions part of this website that the list of films ends at 1979, and the reason is the commercial failure of the movie The Wiz, which I was going to talk about anyway in regards to this collection, sort of allowed filmmakers to put black-led movies aside for that time, and that's when independent filmmaking for black filmmakers emerged, really. So that's the last film in the archive. 1979 is when the movies stop.
I personally understand the historical reason of why she decided to stop there, but I would have loved for her to continue to go on to the 90s and 80s so that we could also get a wider breadth of understanding. I love that Maya made this. I'm so happy. I think it's going to help especially start young filmmakers and young writers like myself's foray into black films that I haven't necessarily exposed myself to. But I know you gave us a lot, girl, but I want more. I want more, black woman. I want more.
Well, she can keep adding to it and deleting from it, just like
she will.
Kanye is.
She
So.
should. I thought Shaft was on here.
I love thinking of Donda as the Black Rapper Archive.
Sure.
We all looked at the list and I think picked a few of our favorite films that we have enjoyed that we wanted to point out. But you should also just try and pour through the entire list as well.
Because there's definitely stuff you haven't seen, almost assuredly. There's definitely stuff I haven't seen. It's a good sort of syllabus for digging into black film history.
This just starts in 1915, so...
Yes.
I'm not even watching white films from 1915.
I know, right. D.W. Griffith, I can barely handle
we
Rachel
had
Griffith. Yes, right.
See. Who and who?
What about Griffith?
I love you, Lewis.
Griffiths, by the way. I want to first bring up probably one of the most famous movies in the collection, which is Carmen Jones, which is from 1954. It's the musical adaptation of Bizet's Carmen with lyrics by Oscar Hammerstein. But it stars Dorothy Dandridge, who, if you know that name, one, you probably either know this movie or you know that Halle Berry played her in a TV movie in the early 2000s, around the time she got her Oscar. And a couple things about this movie. One, even though her singing is dubbed in this movie, because it's operatic singing somewhat, and so is Harry Belafonte's singing is dubbed. They thought he wasn't a good enough singer in this movie, and so they got somebody else to do it. Guys, what the hell? Anyway, it is a real joy of a movie, and she gives a slay performance. First of all, this character comes on screen, Carmen, dressed, like sultry, enticing Carmen, and I for a moment think I am watching the horniest character who has ever been on screen. Just fully like walking into, she works at the parachute factory and she's ensnaring men and wears like jewelry that makes you think she's a temptress and all this stuff. But then the movie gets deeper, and who else is added to the cast? Pearl Bailey, who we have not enough education about as a society anymore. Pearl Bailey, who I think most people know from her turn in Hello, Dolly, a little bit later in her career, gives such a saucy performance here, and sometimes looks so much like Queen Latifah. It is absolutely shocking, and I can't believe we haven't had that biopic performance yet. Though, of course, Queen Latifah has already given us Bessie Smith. Maybe she's tired of that. I don't know.
She's like, I don't want to be a matron ever again.
Yeah, right. But guys, this is a musical movie that is also, for an older musical, pretty concise. It's like an hour and 40 minutes. You really should dig into it and see that Dorothy Dandridge, who died at 42 of an embolism, but there's some mystery around her death, was a real find and really just a really dynamite performer.
The thing I think about with Carmen Jones often is that James Baldwin did not like this movie.
Right.
His essay in Notes on a Native Son basically argues that the film tries to, make a case for the fact that black people aren't amoral, to make them human to white people. But the answer is that the black characters are basically written as white people. He also said it was badly. He also said it was badly sung.
That's
entire
interesting.
movie.
He said, most importantly, I have choir notes.
And he said the lyrics are crude and vulgar in a way that is not characteristic of black people at the time. But he did love Pearl Bailey because she seemed to have a sense of disdain for the film itself, and that Dorothy Dandridge looked silly next to Pearl Bailey.
Silly is a good insult.
And then basically the dialogue also doesn't sound like how black people actually spoke at the time.
You're saying Oscar Hammerstein didn't have a handle on the vernacular? I'm simply blown away. The man who gave us The Sound of Music. But also, of course, she was the first black Best Actress nominee, and she lost to Grace Kelly in The Country Girl, and that's, of course, a famous race because she beat Judy Garland in A Star is Born, which, any way you look at it, is some bullshit. So it was the original Emma Stone winning for La La Land against Natalie Portman and Isabelle Huppert, to reference an earlier conversation. And then, as I mentioned earlier, The Wiz is on this list. And first, Ease on Down the Road, one of the great musical songs ever. But also, guys, that subway station scene where like the garbage can's coming after Dorothy is some scary fucking shit. It's just not right. As in, there are some scenes, it's like how what's his name? The Christopher Lloyd character in Who Framed Roger Rabbit is simply too scary. There are some movies for kids where something happens and accidentally it's 3 layers too scary. This is one of those movies, but you should see it to be terrified along with me because I need more commiseration about this fucking scene that still stays with me.
I love The Wiz. I think that Sidney Lumet did the thing.
Oh yeah, I mean the cast is shocking. Diana and Michael Jackson, skipping along in quote unquote urban themed Yellow Brick Road. A lot of fun.
It doesn't shock me that it flopped though.
Right.
It's such a weird film.
It's also so gloomy in a way too. It's very rare for a musical in that it has a kind of overcast feeling about it.
Yeah. And the original Wizard of Oz is, sort of like bright and colorful, obviously like it starts in black and white and then it moves into Technicolor. And this doesn't do that. It sort of moves from New York City into a just sort of grimy city. And so it's sort of like the whole thing sort of feels sort of like muted and one sort of color.
Muted is exactly right, yes.
But I love the music in The Wiz, and I think the show is really fun.
Of course, Home from The Wiz, one of the great songs. And rather importantly, when Whitney Houston made her, I think, debut on American television, she sang Home. And we sort of were under the impression she would be a Broadway-type belter at first at the beginning of her career. She must have been 19 or something, I believe. And then her first album took off. And I just want to say, this is completely off topic now. Thinking About You from that album is so good, and no one ever talks about that Whitney Houston song.
But now we said it.
Right. Okay. You got to listen to that right now. I miss when music sounded like that kind of R&B / pop. I guess what became New Jack Swing.
Maybe they can listen to it after they listen to this episode, though.
Okay, great. Good.
Yeah.
All right. Don't
Let us
turn
get
off
to
the
ours.
podcast.
Don't pause and go and think you'll come back. You're going to forget. Just stay
We
here.
got to keep those retention rates, Lewis.
We've been looking at graphs recently, so this is very important to us.
I grabbed a collection of crime films because I love crime.
Yeah, and just moral decadence. Go ahead.
Yes.
What'd you pick?
No, I picked like Coffee, Shaft, Foxy Brown, Superfly.
You have an era you like.
I love like that blaxploitation genre. You know, like I think that the 70s were like a really good time for black film, to be honest. And seeing just sort of like these types of larger than life characters who usually, you know, like Coffee, who's Pam Grier, who's a nurse, but then by night she's like fighting criminals that got her sister addicted to drugs. You know, it's a lot of like lurid crime films, like about like the seedy underbelly of the drug world, but it also has like usually someone like going full vigilante and protecting their community. And I find those films kind of fun. I like Coffee. I like Shaft with Richard Roundtree. Still maybe the best. We've had a lot of bad Shaft films.
Sometimes I forget we had a Shaft movie, 2 years ago? Yeah.
The most recent one is Unfortunate and slightly homophobic. Also love Superfly, which I think most people know because of the soundtrack.
Mr. Curtis Mayfield, yes.
Yeah. All these films always have like the best music in them. Like whenever you think about the blaxploitation genre, and you know, like a lot of them were films, you know, made by black people, but a lot of them were also films made by white people. And it was, you could say that it was giving you a interpretation of blackness to America that wasn't, you know, how we should have been presenting ourselves in the 70s. You know, it's
right. It wasn't respectability politics or whatever.
Yeah, not that, but goddamn, some of the best music
and costumes
you've ever heard, and costumes were all in these projects.
And that's for me when the era of black movies gets to be watchable as far as the coloring. I don't know why I can't do a black and white film. I don't know if it's the stupid 90s child in me. I just have such a hard time. So when we get to that era, I feel like the sheen and the wash on it, literally the Afro sheen, is beautiful and fun and easy to watch.
And the last other blaxploitation film I picked was Ganja in Hess, which is a Bill Gunn horror film.
Oh, I don't know anything about this. What is it?
It's an experimental 1973 horror film written and directed by Bill Gunn, who's also in that independent film that I talked about last year, Losing Ground. And it's just about a man who becomes a vampire after his assistant stabs him with a cursed dagger. So it's sort of giving you like the Dracula story, but it's very, you know, like blaxploitation vibes. So it's a really fun movie. I also watched Ganja and Hess for the first time last year during the early days of the pandemic.
Oh, yeah.
Oh.
Remember when we were like
Panic
productive
mode?
during the pandemic? I was like, I'm going to watch 15 movies a week. And then I
What happened?
I did learn a lot, and I have no other skills left. I have no social skills. I have no...
Like, but I can analyze the shit out of a movie.
And now I pass out trying to watch a movie.
Woof, it is tough.
That's okay. I wasn't giving you a lot.
You're like, ugh, I'm tired.
The archive is reawakening my desire to start watching content again. I mean, of course, I've been watching TV and going through. I watched The Girlfriend Experience because you mentioned it recently on the podcast, Lewis. And boy, oh boy, do I have a lot to say. But that is a show about a white woman, so let me get to the black part. So I had seen only a small portion of the movies on the archive, and I wanted to find, because lately I've been really interested in African and diaspora storylines, and I wanted to see if there's anything on there that included that. And I also have to tell everyone in the audience to join me in my descent into being an insufferable film nerd by getting Criterion, because you need to have Criterion to watch a lot of these things that are streaming. So I watched 2 short films that I really, really enjoyed. Well, the first one is called Tao, and it follows the life of like a young Senegalese man by the name of Tao as he matures into adulthood. And it is a short film by Ousmane Sembene, who is also, of course, an African director and filmmaker. And it's set in Dakar, right, in 1970s Senegal. And it's just such a beautiful film. The city looks pastoral and elegant, and like all the deep, rich skin colors of all the African people against the sand and the mountains. It's breathtaking. Like you're just constantly watching what seems like just beautiful portrait work. And the movie goes back and forth between Wolof, the Senegalese language, and French. Of course, it's subtitles, so girls, get your reading glasses out. But it's a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful film. And the second one that I watched kind of accidentally felt like the flip side to Tao, because there's moments in Tao where, because it is set in 1970s Africa, all of the conflict is dire. It's life or death. It's I can't eat. I need to find food. And I'm finding too that I enjoy stories that have those level of consequences. It's giving Willa Cather. It's giving high stress. It's giving, for me, I just enjoy the storylines that can come out of that, because sometimes, like in Tao, the main character denies his own child because he knows that he can't afford to be a father. And like, you're just not going to get that in a modern movie. The level of need and necessity isn't there as it would be with like a colonial African film. But the second thing I watched was Diary of an African Nun, not Diary of a Mad Black Woman, but it is essentially the same thing. It's also on Criterion. It is the short film that is made by it's made by Julie Dash, and also it's
Daughters of the Dust.
Daughters of the Dust. Yes, this is her work before Daughters of the Dust, and you can tell there's a lot of like, she's creating a lot of the beginnings of the like very intense shots of Black women that she uses in that film as well. But it's based off an Alice Walker's short film.
This one's called Fetuses of the Dust.
The little embryos of the dust.
The natural prequel, yes.
Yeah. Shouts out Alice Walker, Pulitzer Prize winner, baddie, legend. We love her. But it's the story of a Ugandan nun as she kind of sits in her room, locked alone in her little hut. It's giving Brie Larson in, the room.
No, it's giving Brie Larson in general. Brie Larson just sits at home.
Locked up like a cherub for some reason. And it's this woman as she, analyzes her relationship with Christ, and she like laments what it feels like to be living under white colonialism in Africa, but also wanting to live amongst her people who are the natives. And it's just heartbreaking and beautiful, and the shots of the lead are breathtaking as well. I just think that those are 2 beautiful films for young Black people to watch. Everyone really, but especially those who are interested in old African stories.
When you said it stars a Senegalese man named, I immediately thought you were going to say Akon. I was like, oh, it's a movie starring Akon. Nope, it's not. Anyway,
it's starring Coney from Coney 2012.
I also neglected to mention that Gaja and Hess was remade in 2014 by Spike Lee. It's that film, The Sweet Blood of Jesus. It's also one of Spike's worst films. So avoid that and watch the original film.
But there's a lot to browse. My God, you can go there and just, it's a dang library.
Also, all of this Black film archive made me think, God, I wish Hype Williams would have made more films. God, I wish we didn't scare him away with whatever the response was to Belly, because I feel like I miss him. So to Hype Williams with love, come back.
I think that, and also this archive ending at 79 after The Wiz, is just a constant note that, when a Black film doesn't do well in Hollywood, they're like, let's stop making some, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, speaking of Julie Dash, and like when she directed Daughters of the Dust, and was like that first Black woman to have directed a film for studio, we're now with Candyman being number 1 at the box office. And it's the first number 1 by a Black woman at the box office. The Black Film Archive is incredibly necessary to immerse yourself in, culture and films that have existed. For quite some time, Black people have been making films that are fantastic for decades, but now there's a place where you can look and find out how you can access them. I mean, really just check out some of those earlier, like fucking short films and like the silent ones too. I watched like a very good short film with someone dressed in a devil costume. So check those out.
Just say the Donda music video unreleased that you watched.
I love those scary ass movies from the 1910s and 20s where it's about like death has a mirror face and he passed into the room. Anyway, people were fucked up then.
Yeah. Well, I feel like that's when the short story was like having a heyday, and it was okay to explore themes like that. So putting it in short films was a lot more acceptable. Now all we get is hair love. I'm kidding. Love you, Matthew A. Cherry.